Ladies and gentlemen, I've decided not to seek a seventh term in Parliament.
Bill Shorten has called time on a long career in federal politics, announcing he'll retire before the next federal election. Joining me now to unpack the news from Canberra is federal politics reporter Dan Jervis-Barty. Now, Dan, everyone I've spoken to today about this news has given me an answer that involves rats and sinking ships. How do you view today's announcement by Bill Shorten?
I'm not sure I'd use either of those descriptions. I think Bill Shorten has possibly made a calculation that he's not going to become Prime Minister. He obviously got very close when he was Labor leader in 2019. All the polls were suggesting that he had one hand on the keys to the lodge. That obviously didn't happen, and there's been lots of rumours and scuttlebutt that he wanted to get back there one day. I'm sure he did. But I think it's probably dawned on him that is not going to be part of his future, and he's decided to, rather than contest the next election and go around again, he's seen an opportunity for a career pivot and he's taken it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that career pivot. It's a plum job in academia.
Yeah, so he's going to become, as of February next year, he'll be the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Canberra. So it's one of the universities here in the nation's capital. And yeah, he spoke in his press conference today about, an enduring interest in education and in particular the importance of sort of investment in people. He made this interesting comment about how long after we've sort of dug up all the resources we can, we're still going to have people. And he's got an interest in, if you look through his career, that's been one of the threads. He was a union official who looked after workers. He was the minister for the NDIS, and he was one of the original architects of the NDIS and had a real deep interest in people with disabilities. The other one of his sort of standout legacy was fighting for justice for the victims of robo-debt. So he's always been a people-focused person, and I think that's going to be the attitude that he takes to this new role.
Yeah, so then I guess would you say this, because obviously there's going to be a lot of people trying to frame this in different ways, but would you say then that it says more about Bill Shorten than maybe it does about Labor's prospects?
Like you said, you can probably ask 100 people in Parliament House or on the street about it and they'll give you different answers. My read is that it's about Bill Shorten has made a calculation about his future. I think if you look at the polls, it's not as though Labor is sort of staring down the prospect of electoral wipeout. I mean, they're still ahead in every poll. So I think he's looked at it and thought, I'm still young enough to be able to move into a different career. Like I said, the prospect of him being Prime Minister is probably diminishing by the day. There are other people, whether it's Jim Chalmers or Tony Burke, who've probably leapfrogged him in the pecking order. So that is my personal assessment, that it's probably more a decision that Bill Shorten is someone who's a very astute, very strategic. He knows how politics works, perhaps better than anyone. And I think he's made a decision based on a sort of careful and calculated assessment of that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The vibes feel very different to the end of Scott Morrison's tenure, when it did look like they were staring down the barrel of defeat and ministers were jumping off the ship left, right and centre. Now let's take a listen to what Anthony Albanese had to say when he joined Shorten this morning.
I think it's a credit to Bill that this news will come as a surprise, because at no point in the past 2 and a bit years would any observer of Australian politics think that Bill Shorten was taking it easy or slowing down. In this term and right throughout his 17 years in Parliament, and before that as an official, a proud official of the trade union movement, Bill has given it everything every single day. On that note, I want to make it clear that I've asked Bill to remain in Cabinet until he departs in February, because he and I agree there is important work still to be done.
It's interesting they're listening to the PM. It sounds as though he wasn't blindsided by this news. How long do you think he had known that this was something that Bill Shorten was considering?
It's probably only something that the two of them can know. I think what we do know is that the Prime Minister had discussions with senior people in his cabinet earlier this year just to sort of sound out what they were thinking about ahead of the next election. And through those conversations, we know that Brendan O'Connor and Linda Burney made it clear to the Prime Minister that they intended to step down. And obviously, that has since triggered a reshuffle. So potentially, when Mr. Albanese was having those discussions, he and Mr. Shorten spoke, and Mr. Shorten sort of said this is potentially something that he would look to do. In terms of the timing, I mean, Mr. Shorten made the observation that the university that he's moving to only signed off on the appointment last night. So that's a sort of an explanation as to why perhaps he didn't announce his retirement earlier. So I think, it's unlikely that these conversations have only happened in the past weeks. I think it's in all likelihood has been going on for a little bit longer than that, but has been kept, as the Prime Minister alluded to, well under wraps. There's been lots of rumours and speculation about Bill Shorten, whether he'd become the next ambassador for France. That was a rumour at one stage, but we didn't ever once hear that he might become a university vice-chancellor. So they've managed to keep it, in-house and close-knit, and obviously you caught a lot of people by surprise initially today, but I think on reflection it's probably not entirely surprising.
And what's been the response in Canberra to the news today?
So lots of, as it tends to happen when politicians who have been around for a long time announce their retirement, there's a flood of tributes from across the political divide. We obviously had Mr. Albanese paying tribute. You've had other senior Labor figures, Richard Marles, paying tribute, but also Scott Morrison, who was sort of in that position not long ago, having to leave politics and go into a different career. We've heard Tony Abbott posted a message on Twitter, Peter Dutton as well. So, look, they've all sort of fought with Bill Shorten. He's a political brawler, and I think there is deep respect for him and his sort of commitment to the Labor cause and his commitment to fighting for his side of politics. So those tributes will no doubt continue. And of course, Mr. Shorten's sticking around until next February. So he's got quite a long victory lap before he ultimately leaves.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how that victory lap unfolds.
Well, and probably not victory lap, maybe farewell lap.
Exactly.
You have to
we'll
win
see.
something to have a victory lap. Yeah, we will see.
Indeed. Federal politics reporter Dan Jervis-Barty, thanks for joining me on the show.
No, my pleasure.